What's good, y'all? We are back on Planet Rell, and we have finally the new Ultimate Spider-Man, written by Jonathan Hickman, drawn by Marco Cacchetto, and colored by Matthew Wilson. Let's get into the story. So we here in New York City in January, and this is already some really good planning by Jonathan Hickman. Having the actual series come out in January and having an actual story starting in January. So we start here with my boy Peter Parker, fresh out the shower, and he looks at himself in the mirror. He like, bro, I'm not getting no younger. Then he starts getting dressed and ready for work. He buckles his belt, grabs his ring, and heads out the door. Now, one thing I did notice while I'm making this video, I didn't even peep it while I was reading, Aunt May's picture right here as he was grabbing his ring. And when I realized that was her, bro, I was like, now, if you don't know what happened to Aunt May, I will explain it later in this episode because it does get talked about. Now we see Peter's two kids, Richard and May Parker. And Richard is named after Peter's dad. And May, y'all know she's named after Aunt May. And this made me think about May Parker from Earth 982, and she was Spider-Girl. And it also made me think about Renew Your Vows, where Peter and MJ were married, and they had a daughter named Annie, and they all had spider powers. Yes, Peter, MJ, and their daughter all had spider powers. Now Pete tells his kids good morning, and May is excited to see him. And Richard is like, yo, you sound tired. You had a late night, didn't you? And Pete tells him yeah, that he goes to grab some bacon and some coffee. Now Pete is grateful that MJ made him some coffee, and you see MJ in the corner, and she tells him that it looks like he needed. And they start to love on each other, and Pete like, dang, I look that tired? He had a late night, and he said he didn't sleep. And MJ asks him, you didn't sleep or you couldn't sleep? And Peter tells her that it was just a little bit of both. Now MJ says that Peter not getting a lot of sleep is expected because today is a specific day. And during this episode, you will see what today is for the Parker family. Now May has this like glass ball type thing, and Peter grabs it from her and tells her it's not a toy. Then MJ asks Pete, does he want to talk about what's going on today? And he says he does, but he got to go to work. So he tells her that they'll talk about it later. And he says bye to everybody, and he goes to work. And he works at the Daily Bugle. And when I seen this, I'm like, okay, I wonder what he does here. Cause he ain't Spider-Man yet, so he can't be taking pictures of Spider-Man. Now when Peter gets there, he starts talking to Betty about what's going on. Then of course, J. Jonah Jameson is yelling Peter's name. Now Peter tells Jonah good morning, and he say what's up to Peter. Then he continues walking, yelling Parker. And when I was sitting here reading it, I'm like, who is he talking to? Then we find out it's Uncle Ben, and he's the Daily Bugle's managing editor. Now Ben like, bro, Jonah, I can hear just fine, and I didn't answer you because you was yelling. Now Jonah gonna say that he only yelling because Ben is old and he worried that he can't hear. And Ben is like, bro, is there something you need? And Jonah tells him that they have a meeting at 4, and he can push it back because they got that thing today. But Ben tells him it's all good and he'll be back. Then Peter walks in and he asks Ben, is he ready to go? And Ben tells him that he been ready. And he asks Peter why he late. Then Peter tells him like, I was neither on time nor early. Then Ben and Jonah start joking about how kids be clever. Now Peter tells Jonah that they should have their own show. But Jonah like, why? We got our own paper. Then Ben grabs his jacket to leave. Then he tells Jonah that he'll be back at 4 for that meeting. And they leave. But Jonah like, hey Peter, hold up. Then he asks Peter where's his tie. But Peter like, I don't really wear ties. Then Jonah tells him that he has to wear a tie. And so Jonah gives Peter his tie and he puts it on him and he ties it for him. Then Peter asks Jonah how does he think Ben is doing. And Jonah tells Pete that him and his Uncle Ben love talking about how they feel. But Pete asks the question again, like, how do you really think he's doing? And Jonah tells him that he's tough. And asking how Ben is like asking how durable a stone is or another geological remnant from another time. Then Jonah tells Pete, regardless of how Ben looks like he's doing, keep a lookout for any cracks that he might see within Ben. And they agree to it. Then he tells Peter that he may not be respectful, but you look respectable. And Jonah continues by telling Pete that if he wants to know how his Uncle Ben is doing, all he has to do is ask. Then of course he tells Peter that he gonna want his tie back. Man, I would have been like,
see you, chump.
Now we in the city with Uncle Ben and Pete. and Pete tells Uncle Ben that everybody is wondering how he's doing. Then Ben responds to him saying that everybody is not wondering about him. Then he basically tells Peter to be intentional with his words. And Peter like, alright, bet, I'm worried about you. And Ben asks why. And Peter tells him that he doesn't talk about what happened. He hasn't talked about it since, how he's doing, or how he feels. Then Ben responds to him like, nephew, you were 15 when your parents died and you came to live with me and your Aunt May. And he tells him that first year was hard for all of them, but they loved Peter. Ben did his best to teach Peter and prepare him for the real world. And Aunt May was better than him at some things, but they did not try to replace his parents. And that was 20 years ago, so now Peter is 35 years old. Then Ben asks him, is there a day that goes by that you don't think about your parents? And is there one day that it doesn't hurt that your parents are gone? Then Peter tells him no, and Uncle Ben tells him, do you know exactly how I feel? Now we see a large crowd at a memorial service, and we see the names of the people that lost their lives from a specific incident. And I know this ain't part of the Ultimate Spider-Man story, but hey, just bear with me. This all gonna make sense when I'm done explaining. So back during Ultimate Invasion, the Maker traveled to a whole nother universe designated 6160, which is now the new Ultimate Universe, and he caused dramatic change. Now at the end of issue 1 of Ultimate Invasion, he stopped the spider from biting Peter when he was back in high school. Then at the beginning of issue 2, we see Loki is king of Asgard, and Thor is bowing down to him. It's revealed that Loki had help from the Maker to kill Odin to become king of Asgard and taking Thor's birthright away from him. And the Fantastic Four had their ship delayed by the Maker when they were supposed to get their powers, so there's no Fantastic Four in this universe. Now Obadiah Stane and Howard Stark ran Stane and Stark Enterprises, and during the story of Ultimate Invasion, Howard Stark is Iron Man and Obadiah Stane is War Machine. Now this panel right here really lets you know like it's some crazy stuff going on. So a little bit more about Ultimate Invasion. The Maker took this universe's Reed Richards and turned him into Dr. Doom. And there was a fight between the Maker and a future version of Kang that wore an Iron Man suit. Then Howard Stark, who is Iron Man, came in and just blew everything up. And right now we don't know what's going on with Howard Stark, because the last time we saw him was after that explosion. And we saw him take off the mask of the person that was Kang, who was wearing the Iron Man suit. And we haven't seen him since. Then we see Tony Stark become Iron Lad. He didn't take up the name Iron Man because his dad had that, and he don't even know if he's dead or alive. Now let's talk about what happened in the Ultimate Universe one-shot. So here we got Reed Richards, Dr. Doom, Iron Lad, Tony Stark, Sif, and Thor. And they breaking into the Maker's city, which was locked, and Thor just blasted it open. And there were these things called repositories, and they contain relics of stolen life from a lot of people. And one of those relics that Reed Richards, Dr. Doom found was a spider that the Maker took. Now something crazy happened. Thor was stabbed through his chest by Captain Britain. Then Captain Britain starts to attack everybody. Then him and Tony start fighting. And Tony tells Captain Britain that he's going to put an end to what him and the rest of this world's Illuminati are doing. Then Tony blasts Captain Britain in the face, and that causes him to lose an eye. Now a little bit after that, Captain Britain went to go talk to the rest of the Illuminati, and you see that they were trying to take over North America. And the people that are in the Illuminati are the Hulk, Viper, who at times speaks for Sunfire, both avatars of Khonshu and Ra, Rasputin from the X-Men, Emmanuel DaCosta, who is the father of Sunspot, who is a mutant in the 616 universe. Now lastly, Captain Britain, and he's crazy powerful. He has the Sword of Might and the Amulet of Right. Now the Illuminati used a Stane and Stark Enterprise satellite to frame Tony Stark, and with Tony causing Captain Britain to lose an eye, they called it a terrorist attack, and they used the beam to beam down on Earth, and they destroyed everything in sight. And then on the news, you see the names of people that lost their lives. And this is how Aunt May and Harry Osborn's parents, Norman and Emily Osborn, lost their lives. Now I know that was a tangent, but I had to do all of that because I didn't want nobody to be confused on what's going on and what happened in the past. But thanks for bearing with me. Now back to the story. Now we got Father Matthew Murdock, and he's speaking about the tragedy that happened. And yes, everybody still believes that Tony Stark did it. And I like how he's Father Matt Murdock here, because in the 616, in the current run, he is Father Matt Murdock too. Now Father Matt talks about how everybody that lost their lives were taken before their actual time, and heaven is more crowded today than they would prefer. Then we see Uncle Ben shedding a tear, and Father Matt says when they think back on all the memories and the sweet memories that they had with their loved ones, as love swells within their heart, listen closely because they will hear angels singing. Then Father Matt introduces Harry to the people so he can speak about his parents. And Harry speaks about a time when he was 7 and him and his dad Norman would throw the baseball to each other. And he felt like the most important person in the world, and now he won't be able to make another memory with his father. Then he says that everybody has lost somebody in their life and that they will live on in their hearts and they will always remember them. But Harry doesn't know if he's going to be able to move on or get better from this situation. And he says when he's all alone, he doesn't hear angels singing. He hears a ball hitting a glove, and sirens, screams, and cries of pain. And he finishes talking by saying that the future was stolen from people, and all they got in exchange were memories. And to Harry, and other people as well, memories are just not enough. And he doesn't know how people are really just expected to live with just memories. So now the memorial service is over, and we see Uncle Ben and Harry shake hands, and she says everything went well except for that last part. Then Peter asks her has she ever met Harry, and she says yeah, only one time. He was like a different person, but of course, it was at another time before that tragedy happened. Then Peter says that Uncle Ben interviewed Norman Osborn a few times, but he never knew who Norman Osborn really was. Then MJ tells him that he was a businessman that was a billionaire. He founded Oscorp Industries, and he was a competitor that was ruthless. But most of all, Norman was a loving father. Then Peter asks MJ, are her and the kids going home? And she says yeah, and Pete tells her that he'll be home in a little bit, minus anything crazy going on at the Bugle. Then we get to the Daily Bugle, and there's something crazy going on. We see Jonah throwing some papers and he looks pissed. Then he storms out the room, saying that he quits. Now everybody in the office just looking around. Then Jonah walks past Peter and Ben tells Peter to go to his desk and just chill out for a minute, and that they'll catch up later. And Ben goes into the office, and he asks him, did he miss anything? And Robbie tells him that he did miss something. The Daily Bugle is about to go through some editorial restructuring, and J. Jonah Jameson did not care about those changes. Then Ben asks Robbie how he feels about them. And Robbie is so real for this, he said, I'm 2 years away from maxing out my pension. He about to retire and get up through and relax.
One last thing. Tell him to bring me my money.
And Ben like, yeah, that's real. And he says we all got something to fight for. And then he asks Robbie what the changes are. Robbie tells him that there is an increasing number of complaints from advertisers, and it's about their inflammatory content. And to be more specific, it's about how the Daily Bugle is handling the attack that Tony Stark was framed for, and that's why it's going to be some changes. And Robbie looked off in another direction, then Ben does as well, and he asks a question. How do you think I should feel about this? And we got Kingpin sitting at the table. Now the dude who is with Kingpin gotta be Don Rigoletto, who was a mafia boss and the predecessor of Kingpin in the 616. Or it could be Mendel Strom, who was a robot. But I think it's Don Rigoletto. Now Kingpin told Uncle Ben that he should be pleased. Then Ben is like, what do you mean by that? Then he tells Ben like, yo, hey, Jonah gone, he quit. And he's the obvious choice for new leadership. Then he tells Ben that if he wants the job and can handle it, he has a promotion. And all you see is Ben just stand there, and he smiles, and he walks out. Then he goes to the same elevator where Jonah is, and Ben goes to get in the elevator, and when he does, him and Jonah both have this grin, and Ben asks him, what we finna do now? Man, they both got in that elevator and was like, and now it's sometime later in the day, and we see Kingpin getting out the car. Then and we get our first appearance of the new Ultimate Universe's Green Goblin. And I'm not gonna lie, I definitely think it's Harry. Now Buddy got the blick out, and him and Green Goblin look eye to eye. And I'm just wondering, why did Green Goblin blow up that truck? Like, what did Kingpin or this man do? Or what did both of them do to make the Green Goblin do what he did? But now let's head to the bar with no name. And I was surprised seeing Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson in here, because in the 616, this is a bar where supervillains hang out at. But this is another universe, so things are different here. So Jonah and Uncle Ben are talking about what they finna do since they both quit the Bugle. And Jonah like, what's the point of quitting that job if we're gonna turn around and do the same thing all over again? But Ben tells him, this time it'll be different, and that's the point. Then Ben asks Jonah, is there any other thing that you're good at? But Jonah tells him, nah, not really. Do you? And Ben like, nah, not anymore. Now they talking about getting a name and some insurance. And Jonah talks about him doing the news for 30 years and that it's a dirty business. But Ben like, we're gonna do it better this time and we're gonna do it right. But Jonah like, what that look like? Doing it right. And Ben tells him it's gonna be very easy. We just gonna tell the truth. Then Jonah just gives his look, like he looked down and he like, the truth? Then he bust out laughing. And Ben looking at him like, what you laughing for? You don't agree? Then Jonah tells him it's some things in life that he likes to believe in. But in this universe, it's one thing Jonah knows for sure. And it's that there is no truth in the news and that there is no news in the truth. Then he looks at Jonah and he tells him like, bro, I told you it was a dirty business. But Jonah tells him like, hey, let's at least not lie. And Ben like, all right, bet. Then Peter comes to sit with them at the table. And he tells him that it's just been chaos at the Bugle. Then Uncle Ben asks him, did he get caught up in any of that craziness? But Peter tells him that Robbie is the lead now, so his job should be fine. Then he asks Uncle Ben and Jonah what they finna do, and Ben tells him that they started their own business. Then Jonah asks Pete like, yo, you want a job? And Peter like, y'all got some money? But Jonah like, that's a day 2 problem, bro. And he tells Peter to think it over, then he leaves. Now Peter and Ben finna have a one-on-one conversation. And Peter asks him how you just blow up your life and then start a new one in one afternoon. And Uncle Ben responds by telling him like, yo, your Aunt May is dead. You're a grown man, you have a family of your own. And Uncle Ben had the opportunity to leave that job, and he did it. And he left because he didn't want to be in the industry of compromise any longer. And he tells Pete that it was an easy decision. Now from the way Uncle Ben was talking, I really think that he did what he did at the Bugle because he's living for himself now. Aunt May passed away and Peter is grown, so now he only has to take care of himself. Then he asks his nephew, what's going on? Then Peter tells him, my wife is alive and I got a family and responsibilities, so I can't just blow everything up and change my lifestyle. And Uncle Ben tells him like, yo, nobody's expecting you to join us. But Peter is like, it's not that, it's something else. Then Uncle Ben asks him, is him and MJ okay? And Peter like, yeah, we're great, she's great. And he thinks MJ deserves better than him, but she disagrees. And that makes their relationship better. But for the longest time, Peter thought he was doing something wrong his whole life. Like he really thought something was wrong with him. But Peter doesn't know how to explain it, but he knows he's been right, and he doesn't know what to do. Then Uncle Ben just stares at him, and he asks Peter a question. Have you ever heard of inaction is action? And Peter says, yeah. Then Uncle Ben tells him that's a trash way of saying you can't just sit around and wait for something to happen. You gotta go make it happen. Then Uncle Ben tells him that he loves him, and that if he's walking around just asleep to his own life, then he gotta wake up. And now sometime later, we see Peter back at home, and he gives his daughter May a kiss goodnight. Then he talks to his son, and he tells Richard it's time for bed, but Richard wanna finish the chapter he reading in his book. And he says that Peter made him like this, so he cool with it. Then Peter like, alright, bet, that's fair. Finish that chapter and go to bed. Now Peter finna spend time with his lady. Now MJ drinking her wine chilling, and she tells Peter to spill the beans. But he doesn't even know where to start. And she asks him, did Jonah and Ben quit the Bugle? And Peter tells her, yeah, and they started up their own thing within a 3-hour time span. Then MJ talks about the memorial and how she's never seen Uncle Ben cry. Then Peter like, yeah, and he just goes past that, and he tells her that he's sorry that he came home late because he went to go check up on his Uncle Ben. But it's good that he did go check on him because MJ said he would have been worried all night about him. And that would have gotten in the way of him and MJ talking about what's going on with him. Then she does ask Peter what's going on with him. And Peter tells her that he doesn't want to say anything that he can't take back. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, dog, what you finna say? Then MJ tells him that whatever he has to say, he can say it because it won't change how she feels about him nor their relationship. Now Peter tells her he needs a change. And MJ tells him like, all right, bet. Because when she quit her job to start her own business, Peter was all in with it. Then she tells him like, yeah, it may get tough because we got bills and the kids. Then she asks Peter, why wouldn't you think I would have your back doing something else? Then Peter's like, no, I need a change. He didn't mean like a change in his surroundings and stuff. He meant that he just need a change for himself. And MJ like, oh, that. And Peter like, what you mean by that? Now MJ tells him She knows him. He's a great father and a great husband. But he's been walking around here with this cloud hanging over him. He puts on a smile and a good face, but he's not satisfied with who he is. Then MJ asks him, does he know what he gotta do? And he says, yeah. Then she asks him, are things gonna change between them? And Peter says, never. Now she gives him a kiss on the forehead and she says that settles it and that she's going to bed. And she tells him, go get him, Tiger. And Peter just sits there for a minute and he grabs that glass ball that we saw earlier. Then he goes outside. Now we see him just standing there, just looking at it. And when I was reading this, I'm just wondering what was on the inside. But now we go back to last night. And Peter's sitting there doing some work probably on his laptop. Then it's a bright light that flashes in his face. And it's this message that constantly says his name. And this box is like causing electricity to fly around and stuff. And Peter goes to touch it. Then we get an actual hologram of Tony Stark. And the message he has for Peter is from 6 months into the future. Now Tony says that Peter might not know his name, but Peter says that after what he did, everybody knows him. And there was an attempt to get rid of Tony and his companions. And they went to the only safe place that he could think of. Now Tony is telling Peter that they have to be careful because this world is more complicated and dangerous than he could ever believe. And that there's a component of faith and that it's quietly unavoidable. And all that he asks Peter to do is to listen carefully. Now we see the same glass ball that Peter had earlier and Tony tells him that's for him. And I don't know why that made me think of a Dragon Ball, but it did. And Tony tells him that inside of it is a Picotech stealth suit that'll mask his identity. And there's a bioorganic catalyst necessary for him to undergo his post-human transformation. And Peter like, what do you mean by all of this, bro? And Tony tells him that 20 years ago, he would have gotten bitten by a radioactive spider. And he would have gotten amazing powers. And he would have became one of Earth's most prominent superheroes. But instead of that happening, a great evil known as the Maker traveled through time and space and almost erased every single hero from this universe from existence, and Peter was one of them. And Tony says that the Maker did this so he can treat this Earth as like an experiment. He wanted to create a society that would be directed and controlled by him. Now Tony tells him that he's telling him this message from 6 months in the future, and he's telling that message with other people like Peter. Now Tony says he's going to leave this room where he is at to find another Earth that has regained its heroes, and together they will all set this world free. And it's his greatest hope that Peter will join him. Then he tells Peter that he was supposed to have a different life and that he was supposed to protect and save lives. But all of that was taken away from him. And Tony's dialogue is finishing, and he says those people stole your life. They robbed you of your destiny. The question is, do you want it back? Now we back in the present, and we see that ball orb thing dissolve, and it reveals Peter's stealth suit. Now one of my friends showed me this. It made him think of this when he read the issue. And when I saw it, I was like, yo, like that's a crazy reference. And this reference is from Secret Wars number 8, when Peter first got his symbiote suit. Now we see Peter grab a test tube containing a spider, and that is the bioorganic catalyst that Tony was talking about. And remember, Tony asked Peter, does he want his life back that was stolen? And Peter looks at the spider, and he's like, yeah, I want it. Then we go back to the moments where Uncle Ben tells Peter to wake up. And when MJ says, go get him, Tiger. And then we see Peter let out the spider and it bites his hand. And now we have the ultimate beginning and origin of the new Ultimate Spider-Man. Now y'all already know that this story is getting rated P for peak.
Only the best can do this. 120 of
I don't know what Hickman got cooking for this story, but I know it's finna be great and generational. Let's talk about this issue in the comments. Whatever thoughts, theories, or how y'all felt about it, let's talk about it. Also hit that like and subscribe button. But hey man, I'll catch y'all when another video lands on Planet Rell. God bless, I'm out.